Hello everybody, I'm Gwen Campbell-Mindes. Welcome to Gwen's Bookish Ramblings, and so this is the final book that is available in the library for me to read on this series. I actually finally got around to bothering to read the end note description thing, and apparently this is actually like a web series, like whatchamacallit, a serial, like, like Charles Dickens, except not quite as high caliber in terms of its literary value, but more or less the same type of thing, and then they compile them into books later, so I have no idea where this series actually stands in general, but this, like the other ones, is a very good time. In this book, first of all, the MacGuffin of the book is Sean, pictured here on the cover looking all dramatic and behind Dina, and his werewolf mentor guy, Wilmos, has been kidnapped, and so because of that, they agree to host what is effectively the Bachelor with deadly consequences for a galactic regional leader who is basically that they have a competition for his future spouse and the second parent of his child, them being aliens with all kinds of fancy technology. It doesn't actually matter what species or, sex or what have you the other person in this is. They can pretty much just jam the two genes together and they, grow the kid in an artificial womb. Which is what our Bachelor in question, Candosian, with how he came to be, as well as his aunt, who has been a character in the series all the way through. She is Dina's first and primary guest, and she hides out at Dina's inn because there are basically people trying to kill her, and so Dina keeps her from, being killed, in effect, because she's stuck in the inn. Anyway, so basically they have a sort of a face-off, and everybody and a whole bunch of people send out candidates to become his future spouse, and this is the final 12 candidates entering into a very much The Bachelor type contest where they have to have philosophical debates and a talent show and individual dates and so on and so forth, and at the end of it he is supposed to pick a quote-unquote bride. Interestingly, of course, because of the nature of things, they have a bunch of different species who have all sort of brought their representatives. Some of them have brought humanoid adjacent, competitors who look like Candosian, slightly more or less, and then some of them are like the Umbols, who are basically fish, and their competitor is a fish. Anyway, so you have this competition, and nobody on Earth wants to host it, none of the Innkeepers, because you're going to have a bunch of murderous trees, basically, who, as Dina puts it, their first choice, their first thought is murder, and then they go to plan B, which is murder, and then plan C, which is murder, and finally they go to murder. They are the kind of species that they apparently don't have recognizable emotions as per most humanoid species, as per most species that, they understand. But apparently they also aren't logical enough to factor in those emotions in terms of interacting with other people. They just assume they are the most powerful thing in the room and that they can kill all before them, and they tend to be a little perplexed, it seems, when faced with somebody saying, actually, we have more firepower than you do, and if you try to murder us, we will basically, burn your planet to the ground. And they go, oh, yeah, okay, maybe we should do something else. Anyways, they brought a humanoid representative with them who, from what we can tell, was raised by them, and Dina spends much of the book wondering how this girl wound up in their care, and, why did they even have her, and are there any others? It's an interesting little side thing, because she goes through this whole thing, and she's been raised by sociopathic trees. And so, when the talent show comes around, her talent is releasing a bunch of speedy lizards in a, limited area with her and killing them all. And, they sort of have to bring that to a halt because nobody wants to watch somebody just murdering things. It's kind of horrifying. So you have that. You have all these various species, and they're trying to do it. The other reason for entering this is if you make it to the final rounds, your people, the people who are sponsoring a candidate, get even if you don't eventually win and become the spouse, the people get what a so-called minor ask, and that may be an exclusive trade deal, or a particular treaty, or, in one case, the long-lost sovereign of a particular local system had arrived there less because he wanted to win the competition and more because he wanted the minor ask of this particular piece of technology that would identify him as the rightful heir to the, system that he's from. And so he goes through this whole rigmarole, and it turns out that all he wants is the thing. And another one of them was pressured into doing this by, other political forces, and she basically begs the emperor to, because he is in effect the emperor, that she basically begs him to, please don't marry me because I don't want to do this. I want to go home. They made me. And he's like, yep, sure. We'll send you home. You're out of the running. Anyway, so there's also a lot of political maneuvering in this, as you can imagine there would be with people trying to get their candidate married to, effectively an emperor. So there's a lot of this stuff. There's a lot of murder, attempts and counter-murder attempts, and Dina spends, the whole book basically just having a headache, and the whole thing is a massive stress ball. It's just a big ball of stress for her, but the reason they're doing this is because these people have access to this planet that they know Sean's, mentor has been kidnapped to, which is the only reason they're doing this. And so they do the thing. And we get through all of this, and we have all kinds of drama and high-octane, exciting events and back and forth and bringing back characters from other things, and we get to, the grand finale of the book where, we've done this, he's gotten his spouse, and this is basically the book. The book is the dating show, and rescuing Wilmos, the mentor, is, almost an afterthought. And it's even more of an afterthought because they rescue him, and that is basically almost completely forgotten immediately because there's been another through line about these corrupted innkeepers and so-called Ad Hall. Ad Hall are basically magical innkeeper enforcers. They're kind of like innkeeper police. So they've got these massive magic superpowers that they can use to destroy everything in their path. But they have a sort of a limited range in which they are allowed to work. They have a limited jurisdiction. Their jurisdiction is basically Earth and maybe pursuing somebody off of Earth, but basically if you do something wrong on Earth and are being chased by an adhol, you get off of Earth and basically they can't chase you unless it's something really, really extreme. So, but there are a bunch of them that have been corrupted by this evil, corrupting magic thing, and they've been popping up periodically throughout the book series, and it's a mystery and a concern for the innkeepers because, you know, these police officers and some actual innkeepers are basically being turned into monsters, and, you know, they don't know what's going on or why. But, like, this plot line comes rearing back when Dina stumbles into an inn on this planet, on this completely atmospherically inhospitable planet that, you know, there's only one place that, like, can effectively support effectively human life, and that's where, you know, the gateway had opened to, and I mean, that's the only place that they can access, and the only area where Wilmos would have survived in if he did. So they, you know, they're going through this, and she finds an inn there, you know, one of these magical inns out of nowhere, but it's been, like, ruined by the corrupting magic. And then she finds this guy, Sebastian North, who was mentioned a couple books ago when she had asked an oracle the question of, you know, how do I find my parents? And they said Sebastian North and nothing else. So they found him, and he is a former innkeeper who has gone crazy and is doing things like murdering inns. And because inns are sentient, if not sentient, if they are sentient, it's not in a way that anyone can really tell, but they are living things with opinions and tastes and a psychic link with their innkeepers. So he's gone nuts and he's torturing inns to death, in effect, and Dina is just, like, baffled. And then this turns out this is her parents' inn. This is the inn that just up and vanished from a lot. And you have this guy ranting on about how her parents are in his way and she's in his way, and he doesn't explain anything. We've just left that particular plot point dangling. And so Dina, you know, successfully it manages to drive him away. Her parents' inn dying around her, but it leaves her like a tiny cutting, which she grafts into her inn, which, by the way, everybody says is the worst, most terrifyingly scary idea ever. And, like, a friend of hers who's an adhol, who's sort of been staying with them to back her up in the, you know, interstellar Bachelor show with murder and politics, that he'd been hanging around to back her up, and she's like, it's not a seed. I know a seed would kill my inn, but this isn't a seed, it's a cutting, and I'm going to graft it. And he's just like, are you crazy? But she does it, and it seems to work, and then she gets spat out, dun dun dun, on the planet where her sister is, the planet that in the last book where we had seen her sister's perspective back in, like, book 3, that book had ended with what was apparently Maud and Dina's brother showing up out of the clear blue sky. And so Dina is also showing up on the planet, and so it looks like we have sort of the dangling threads for the next book, but I don't have access to that book, so that's where we're dealing with it. But that whole thing has a lot of a feel of a post-credits scene. You know, the story of this book is very much, like, is very much this dating show. It's basically just about the dating show and the murder trees in the dating show and the murder attempts in the dating show and the assassination attempts in the dating show and. And so the story wraps up nicely there. The Wilmos thread basically gets forgotten. It's a great time, but I do feel a little bit critical of the fact that the MacGuffin then almost kind of evaporates into no point at all by the end of the book. Anyways, so yeah, still recommend it if you like this kind of thing, and that's everything, and I will see you all next week.